Lu Qingling died, but she came back to life. What came to life was a lonely soul from another world, traveling from the end of the world. In the first half of his life, he was beaten by someone else and forced to go crazy. He also gave birth to an illegitimate son with an ominous father. In the latter half of her life, Lu Qingling hung up a group of demons and monsters, trampling on countless bones, and playing with the power and hegemony of the country and the world in her hands. Since her rebirth at the bottom of the cliff, this life and death battle has been destined to turn the tide against the wind. Being exiled from home, traveling a long distance of 3,000 miles, punching white lotus flowers, kicking malicious women, wielding swords to chop wolf teeth, and flying to shatter large rocks. Searching for one's background, overturning the false daughter, relieve strange toxins, treat broken legs, and promote medical reputation throughout the world, open up wasteland, dig ditches, build waterways, punish corrupt officials, and build a peaceful park. Garrison private troops, train the dead, open mines, build weapons, and build an indestructible base, attack the capital, slay the demon consort, support the new emperor, dominate the country, and be praised for eternity. Keywords of the novel. At the beginning of the game, I was exiled with my unfortunate husband to overthrow the court without a pop-up window. At the beginning, I was exiled with my unfortunate husband to overthrow the court with my unfortunate husband. Download the complete text. At the beginning, I was exiled with my unfortunate husband to overthrow the court with my unfortunate husband. Read the latest chapter. Chapter 1. Life or death, pick up a dead body, fake a corpse. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. 1. Near death or survival, picking up a dead body, pretending to be a corpse. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Looking at the bottomless cliff beneath her feet, the crazy and foolish woman struggled hard, with a clear fear flashing in her murky eyes. The woman in red tightly gripped her neck, her eyes filled with coldness. Do you still want to be the daughter of the Imperial Marquis's mansion, just like you? As she spoke, she pushed heavily, and the thin and weak figure instantly screamed and fell into the abyss behind her. Ah, 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 ah. Dead. Finally, everyone is dead. Ha ha ha. The cold wind at the edge of the cliff was piercing, and the howling strong wind drowned out the mournful screams, leaving only a burst of crazy laughter. I didn't die. When Lu Qingling regained consciousness, she found herself lying in the cold river water, completely bewildered. She remembered that in order to save the end of the world, she had scattered all her cultivation during the tribulation period, and even her divine soul was scattered by the spring revival formation. After her body died and her soul was shattered, how could she still be alive? Just as she was stunned, a chaotic and painful memory suddenly surged into her mind. After a moment, Lu Qingling suddenly realized that she had been reborn again through physical means and had worn it twice. The original owner of this body was named Zhao Yinong, the daughter of a farmer at the foot of the Luoxia mountain in Yuncheng, Chu. Due to her parents favoring sons over daughters, the original owner suffered from abuse all year round until she was 14 years old. After a night of disappearance, the original owner unexpectedly became pregnant, and she became insane. As a result, she was kicked out of the house and gave birth to a child alone. For the past 6 years, the mother and son have been struggling with hunger and cold, frequently on the brink of death. Perhaps it was because the original owner was sometimes crazy and foolish, and sometimes clear-headed. All of her memories were also intermittent, and the strange pregnancy was a vast blank. The final memory of the original owner was the scene of being pushed off a cliff by a woman in red at the top of the sunset. Seeing this, Lu Qingling let out a gentle sigh. Since you lent me a life, I will live well for you. From then on, you are me, I am you. Lu Qingling got up from the cold river water. It was already deep winter, and her wet clothes were sticking to her body. She was shivering from the cold and was looking up when she suddenly noticed something floating on the river surface. Upon closer inspection, Lu Qingling discovered a male corpse with a handsome face, tightly closed eyes, and intricate patterns embroidered on his fine silk fabric. It was evident that he was an ancient nobleman. Realizing this, Lu Qingling's eyes suddenly lit up. It happened that she had just arrived and was so poor that she was jingling. Since this person had already died, her wealth was considered cheap to her. Thinking so, she lifted her foot and threw herself into the water, swimming towards the dead body. After a moment, she dragged the person to the shore. Just as Lu Qingling was about to start searching for property, her gaze suddenly caught a glimpse of the jade-white waistband around the corpse's waist, which was tied to a valuable sheepskin jade pendant. Ha! This jade pendant seems a bit familiar to the eye. No, this is mine. As she spoke, Lu Qingling excitedly pulled off the jade pendant and was about to take a closer look when suddenly her wrist was grabbed by someone. She looked up and suddenly met a pair of captivating eyes. Xiao Rongjin opened his eyes and saw a beautiful woman holding his jade pendant in her hand. He reached out and restrained the person without even thinking about it. Lu Qingling didn't expect this guy to pretend to be a corpse. Fortunately, at this critical moment, she reacted extremely quickly and slapped the man with a backhand. Xiao Rongjin was caught off guard by the fact that this woman was skilled in martial arts. When the sharp palm hit him, he quickly welcomed him and, as his palms touched each other, his 5 fingers were suddenly tightly held by the opponent. With a successful strike, the other hand, which was wrapped in her big palm, skillfully pulled away from the iron pliers. As soon as she got out of trouble, Lu Qingling immediately put away the jade pendant. Xiao Rongjin, who had been counterattacked by someone, was only momentarily stunned before his face darkened. Due to the poison in his body, he couldn't use his internal power without authorization, so he shouted coldly in a deep voice. "Hand over the jade pendant." Of course, it was impossible for Lu Qingling to hand over the spatial jade pendant that had followed her for 2 lifetimes. Seeing this person chasing after her relentlessly, she thought for a moment and questioned. "Your life was saved by this girl, isn't the grace of saving your life worth just a jade pendant?" Xiao Rongjin suddenly remembered that while he was picking herbs in the daytime, he was suddenly attacked by a small red snake and fell off a cliff. It was this girl who saved him from hearing this. After realizing that the girl in front of Xiao Rongjin was his life-saving benefactor, his tone couldn't help but soften. "Since the young lady saved my life, Xiao must thank you again. However, this jade pendant is the object of Zhao's engagement and has extraordinary significance. Can you please return it, young lady?" Upon hearing this, Lu Qingling choked. No wonder he had just reacted so badly. She thought he was a noble young master and was stingy, reluctant to give up a jade pendant. However, it turned out that this jade pendant was his love item. Unfortunately, she still couldn't repay it. Thinking of this, Lu Qingling coughed lightly and also slowed down her tone. "Xiao Gongzi, I'm really sorry. This jade pendant is also an indispensable item for me. If Xiao Gongzi's fiancé Ae blames me in the future, then I will have to ask Xiao Gongzi to bear with me more." Upon hearing the words, fiancé Ae, Xiao Rongjin's thoughts froze and her eyes also darkened. Lu Qingling saw that the man's expression was not right, fearing that he would forcibly snatch the jade pendant. She had now changed her body, and the elixir field was empty. The reason why she was able to escape from him just now was simply because she caught him off guard. Thinking of this, Lu Qingling turned around and planned to sneak away as a gesture of respect. Unexpectedly, Lu Qingling's run immediately alarmed Xiao Rongjin, who was shaking his mind. Xiao Rongjin frowned and hesitated for a second, then he stood up from the ground and swept towards the direction of landing Qingling. As Lu Qingling was running, she suddenly felt a gust of wind blowing behind her. In a moment of desperation, she quickly threw herself forward and plunged directly into the river. As soon as her body fell into the water, she shivered fiercely from the cold. "It's so cold." Xiao Rongjin watched helplessly as the woman escaped from her claws. The poison in her body couldn't be suppressed because she had just used her internal power. With a mouthful of blood spurting out, the person also fell from mid-air. Upon hearing a popping sound, Lu Qingling turned her head and saw the twisted calves exposed under Xiao Rongjin's high-raised pants, as well as half of the knee bone that had been dug away by Xingsheng, which was eerie and terrifying. This. Lu Qingling's eyes widened in surprise. She didn't expect that this person's leg was actually disabled. Xiao Rongjin, who was lying on the ground, had a highly toxic attack inside his body, feeling as painful as ants gnawing on him. He forcefully took out something from his sleeve, peeled off the craft paper, and threw it into the sky. With a loud bang, the signal flare exploded in the pitch-black night sky. Seeing the exploding signal flare in the air, Lu Qingling exclaimed inwardly that this guy was shaking people. She could no longer be surprised and immediately swam forward with all her might and strength. After a moment, with a loud crash, a figure leaped out of the water and landed first on the riverbank. Then, several more figures rushed out of the river. As soon as Xiao Weiwei and Nanming Yan landed, they saw Xiao Rongjin lying on the riverbank and quickly ran over. Crown Prince Rongjin. Seeing that they had finally arrived, Xiao Rongjin endured the pain of the poison and spoke in a deep voice. The Xuanluan Jade pendant has been stolen, hurry up and chase after it. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Out of the white bone umbrella, seize the jade pendant, seize the sun. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. White bone umbrella out, snatching jade pendant, snatching sun. What? Upon hearing this, Nanming Yan's face instantly changed. He turned his head and looked towards Xiao Rongjin's finger, only to see that the long river at the bottom of the cliff was incredibly deep. Xiao only looked at the pitch-black river without a trace of people and immediately spoke up. Hurry up, let's chase along the river. She can't run far. Wait. Xiao Rongjin spoke up to stop him, pointing to the nearby river and saying. Everyone went into the water, searching at the bottom of that section of the river. At this moment, Lu Qingling was holding her breath and hiding at the bottom of the river. When she heard Xiao Rongjin not searching further downstream, but instead coming towards this side, she immediately cursed her mother in anger. This person was also too shrewd, she really underestimated him. Seeing those people getting closer and closer, she couldn't help but turn around and quietly move forward as she was about to be surrounded. Over there. As soon as Lu Qingling moved, she was immediately spotted by Xiao Rongjin in the air. Stop. Hand over the things. Xiao Wei let out a loud shout and hugged Xiao Rongjin before diving towards Lu Qingling in the water. Lu Qingling couldn't escape as soon as she saw it. At the critical moment, she gritted her teeth and summoned the white bone umbrella, a life treasure refined in the cultivation world, from the sea of consciousness. It collided heavily with the rushing master and servant. The Nanming inkstone on one side suddenly exclaimed in surprise. Be careful, Crown Prince. Bang. Puff. Lu Qingling did not use her spiritual power, but after all, the white bone umbrella is a spiritual weapon. How could the mortal body be its opponent? After colliding with Xiao Rongjin and Xiao Weiwei, Lu Qingling immediately recalled her white bone umbrella, sat on it, and left in an instant. In order to resist the attack, Xiao Rongjin exerted his internal strength again in a state of urgency. He was hit hard by the force and fell to the ground, vomiting blood in his mouth. His eyes were fixed on the direction of Lu Qingling's escape, and he reluctantly fell into a coma. On this side, Lu Qingling used her divine sense to control the white bone umbrella and escape from the encirclement. As soon as she landed, a mouthful of blood spurted out. She immediately took out a top-quality pill from the jade pendant space and swallowed it. Then, a wave of spiritual energy quickly enveloped the trembling sea of consciousness. After a moment, Lu Qingling finally breathed a long sigh of relief and regained her composure. Fortunately, she had opened the space jade pendant in advance. Otherwise, she wouldn't have dared to use her divine sense to drive the white bone umbrella against the person surnamed Xiao. After all, her current primordial spirit is not complete, and what she has traveled through is only a fragment of primordial spirit. Using her divine sense to control objects is still very difficult, and she might even explode the sea of consciousness. Lu Qingling was thinking recklessly as she hurried towards Luoxia village. At night, it was quiet, and Zhao Xiaoxian, who stayed alone at home, was probably already frightened. "Don't move, whoever dares to come over, I'll kill them." In a dilapidated courtyard, Zhao Xiaoxian waved his kitchen knife and looked fiercely at Mrs. He and the 3 brothers of the Zhao family in front of him. "Son of a bitch, put down the knife for me. It's really unbelievable, a wild seed. I've been raising you for 5 years with good food and drink, and I've done my best. Now it's time for you to repay me." Mrs. He, with her hands on her hips, gathered around the yard with her 3 sons in a fierce manner. She thought that during the day, someone had secretly told her that Zhao Yuanwei from the neighboring town was looking for someone to marry her little granddaughter under the shadow. She just ran with a skeptical attitude, but who could have imagined that things would happen? Thinking of the 20 taels of silver that had been spent in vain, Mrs. Zhao excitedly rushed back and blocked the person into the yard. Fortunately, the madman was not there, saving a lot of trouble. With such thoughts, her eyes towards Zhao Xiaoxian became even hotter. At this moment, the outskirts of the hospital were filled with people who stayed up all night to watch the excitement. This old lady is really committing evil. 6 years ago, she drove her crazy daughter out of the house. Fortunately, the mother and son were not starved to death. Now that the child is old, she wants to sell her again. What a crime! Isn't it a crime? You probably don't know yet, do you? I heard we're going to sell that little kid to Zhao Yuanwei in the neighboring town to get married in secret. Matching in marriage. This is too insidious. What's wrong with getting married under the shadow? Who would think that the white silver is too hot? Besides, this child was originally a wild breed, and not soaking them in a pig cage 6 years ago was already considered a relief. You're right, their mother and son have ruined the culture of our village, causing even the girls in our village to be unable to get married and deserve to die. Listening to the constant mockery and sympathy outside the courtyard, Zhao Xiaoxuan's eyes became even more fierce. Mrs. He met Zhao Xiaoxuan's fierce gaze, and her heart suddenly surged. She turned her head and shouted at Zhao Daolong beside her. "Boss, hurry up and tie him up for me. Time is coming, so don't miss the auspicious time." As he was speaking, suddenly a piercing sound of mournful music rang out. Everyone turned their heads and saw a large red sedan slowly appearing on the other end of the road in the pitch-black night. Behind the sedan was a small red coffin carried by 4 people, and a layer of red cloth covered the coffin, with jingling bells falling from the cloth. As the wedding sedan approached closer and closer, the sound of gongs, drums, and bells intertwined. In this pitch-black night, everyone was so scared that they couldn't breathe and immediately dared not speak. Zhao Xiaoxian was also stunned by this scene. Just as he was stunned, a sharp pain suddenly hit his wrist. With a release of his hand and a clang, the knife fell to the ground. "Son of a bitch, be honest. If you dare to resist me again, take off your arm." Zhao Daolong's gloomy voice rang in his ears, and Zhao Xiaoxian was caught dead and unable to move. Thinking of the consequences of being caught, he struggled frantically in fear and shouted. "Let go of me! Let go of me! You guys let go of me!" Suddenly, with a loud slap, a heavy slap hit Zhao Xiaoxuan's face, tilting his head to one side. "Pooh, despicable embryo! Second, block his mouth for me." After speaking, Mrs. He immediately changed her expression and greeted the incoming steward Zhao with a flattering expression. "Steward Zhao, I am ready for the person." The butler Zhao was about to respond and an old voice hurriedly interrupted the transaction. "Wait a minute. The clan leader is here." I don't know who shouted, but the crowd cheered and made way. The head of the Zhao family, who is 60 years old and has white hair, walked in with a dignified expression, supported by his son. Mrs. He, what are you doing? Faced with the powerful Zhao clan chief, Mrs. He had a confident and righteous expression on her face. Clan leader, this is our Zhao family's own business. I'm selling my own grandson, and no one can manage it. Upon hearing this, Chief Zhao shouted in a deep voice. Nonsense. 6 years ago, your Zhao family had already kicked Zhao Yinong and Zhao Shaoxian out of the family, severed their relationship, and established written evidence in black and white. Now, Zhao Shaoxian is no longer a member of your Zhao family. Upon hearing this, Mrs. He immediately refused to comply. Clan leader, I don't care about any black or white words. This dead brat is our Zhao family. I sell my grandson without breaking the law. Not breaking the law, but you have offended me. A cold voice suddenly sounded from outside the courtyard, and Lu Qingling slowly walked in amidst the surprised gazes of everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Beat her half to death, it turns out she's not biological. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Beat her half to death, it turns out she's not biological. Bang. Ow. Mrs. He was so shocked when she saw Lu Qingling walking in that before she could speak, she screamed and flew backwards. After hitting the old witch with a crisp and sharp punch, Lu Qingling turned her head to look at the 3 brothers of the Zhao family. She hooked her hand and asked contemptuously. Do we go together? No, no, no. Ah. As the 3 of them shook their heads and waved their hands in fear, Lu Qingling rushed forward with one swift step, and with a few punches, she fiercely knocked them out. Ah, ah, ah. Mother. Accompanied by screams of agony, Zhao Shaoxian ran towards him, crying and shouting. Lu Qingling quickly untied the rope that bound Zhao Shaoxian and carried the crying little man into her arms. Don't cry, look at my mother continuing to avenge you. As she spoke, Lu Qingling hugged Zhao Shaoxian tightly, turned around, and lifted her leg to kick towards the stunned Zhao butler on one side. Ah! Cold Buting was kicked in the lower body, and manager Zhao let out a scream of pain before immediately falling to the ground. Lu Qingling looked down at the butler Zhao, who was about to faint from the pain, with a captivating gaze. Remember, I am the daughter of Hitsuelan, Zhao Yinong. If you have any skills, just use them. My Zhao family is not afraid of any Zhao officials. Upon seeing this, the Zhao clan leader's heart sank. She didn't want to live anymore for openly offending the 2 Ba Wang, Zhao Yuanwei. After speaking, Lu Qingling turned around and her gaze swept over everyone's face outside the courtyard like a knife. Her sharp gaze startled all the onlookers, causing them to tremble in an instant. She scanned around and lightly lifted her red lips, shouting loudly. Get lost. As the words fell, the people scattered like birds and beasts, running away one after another. Even the steward Zhao on the ground was carried away by 2 servants, risking his life. In the courtyard, only the head of the Zhao clan and his son Zhao Shu remained standing in place. Lu Qingling didn't want to say much, she reached out and pointed to the courtyard door. Please leave well, clan leader and Uncle Zhao. Zhao Shaoxian nestled in Lu Qingling's arms. Seeing that the bad guys had been driven away, he raised his hand to wipe away his tears and excitedly shouted at Lu Qingling. Mom, you're amazing. Son, you have suffered. Lu Qingling looked at Zhao Shaoxian in her arms, dressed in tattered clothes, thin and skinny, with a big head and a small body, and felt inexplicably sour in her heart. Upon hearing this, Zhao Shaoxian tightly hugged Lu Qingling's neck and leaned against her embrace, relying heavily on her. As long as my mother stays with Shaoxian will not feel the pain. I will. Lu Qingling nodded and promised, thinking that when the original owner was alive, he was sometimes clear-headed, sometimes crazy and foolish, and more often, it was 5-year-old Zhao Xiaoxian who was accompanying and taking care of the original owner. The mother and son relied on each other for their lives. Even in the brief moment of clarity before the original owner's death, this little person was still in her heart. "Oh, oh, my waist is about to break." Suddenly, Mrs. He's cry came from outside the courtyard, interrupting Lu Qingling's contemplation. Her eyes narrowed slightly, and she turned around and walked out holding Zhao Xiaoxian. "Mother, that madman is here again." Zhao Sanlang had just struggled to get up from the ground, but when he turned around, he was scared and fell down again by Lu Qingling, who came strode towards him. "Ow!" Mrs. He was suppressed with another scream of agony. Whenever Lu Qingling thinks of the years of oppression and abuse by the original owner's parents and brother, and even wants to sell her son for a secret marriage, her heart is filled with anger. Just beating her up won't relieve her anger. Thinking of this, she suddenly lifted her foot and kicked the few people on the ground fiercely, cursing and kicking at the same time. "You guys are not as good as pigs and dogs. Even your own daughters and sisters can be abused. It's just a waste of time. Today, I want you to taste the feeling of being beaten. Oh my, damn girl, stop hitting me. I'm your mother." Mrs. He screamed in pain repeatedly. "You don't deserve to be her mother." As she spoke, Lu Qingling suddenly kicked harder, but she kicked wherever it hurt. "Stop beating, stop beating, it hurts me so much, you damn girl, bitch. You're still cursing, it seems like you didn't hit hard enough. Sister, oh no, stop beating me. Stop it now, I won't dare to bully you again in the future." Zhao Dalong couldn't bear the pain anymore and begged for mercy repeatedly. "I dare not fight anymore, little sister. Stop fighting, ouch." Zhao Erlang also started crying in pain. "Damn girl, I'm fighting with you." Mrs. He couldn't bear the pain anymore, and when she got up, she wanted to hit Lu Qingling. Lu Qingling tightly hugged Zhao Xiaoxian with both hands and kicked her heavily in the heart of Mrs. He, flying her several meters away and landing on the ground with a loud bang. She spewed out a mouthful of blood and immediately passed out. The 3 brothers of the Zhao family were frightened by this brutal scene. Zhao Dalong was afraid that he would be the next to be killed, so he trembled and shouted. "Little sister, stop fighting. As long as you stop, I'll tell you a secret immediately." "Secret? What secret?" Upon hearing this, Lu Qingling turned her head to look over with a skeptical expression on her face. "It's a secret about your background." As soon as Zhao Erlang saw a scene, his eyes rolled and he followed closely and jumped out. "What is the original owner's background?" Lu Qingling's gaze fixed and she exclaimed coldly. "Speak up." Zhao Dalong swallowed in fear and stared at Lu Qingling's face, speaking cautiously. "Actually, you were not born to your mother, you were picked up by your father." Upon hearing this, Lu Qingling was completely stunned, and then suddenly realized that no wonder the Zhao family had mistreated the original owner in all sorts of ways over the years. It turned out that it was because she was not biological. Seeing Lu Qingling motionless, Zhao Erlang and Zhao Sanlang thought she didn't believe her and hurriedly shouted. "Little sister, what Big Brother said is true. You were really picked up by Dad, and we all know it. It's our mother who told us, there won't be any falsehood. Hee, so you all know." Lu Qingling suddenly laughed in anger. She gave the 3 brothers a gloomy glance, turned around and walked towards the unconscious Mrs. He, grabbed her hair and pulled it hard. Hiss. Mrs. He, who was in a coma, was pulled out and woke up in pain. Lu Qingling stared coldly into Mrs. He's eyes and threatened. "Grandma, I only want to ask you 2 things. If you dare to say a word randomly, I will immediately send you to the West." Mrs. He was so painful that she couldn't speak. Lu Qingling didn't care and started asking directly. "Is Zhao Yinong your biological daughter?" Upon hearing this, Mrs. He, whose face had been beaten into buns, was shocked and widened her eyes. How would you know? Who told you? Ah. Seeing that she didn't answer properly, Qingling punched her in the stomach, causing old lady He's facial features to wrinkle into a ball and her body to shrink into a shrimp. Speak up. No, no, no. You're the old man. You picked it up. Mrs. He was in excruciating pain, speaking intermittently, but Qingling understood that Zhao Yinong was indeed not a child of the Zhao family. The last question is, why did you sell my son to get married to the underworld? Upon hearing this, Zhao Shaoxian trembled with fear. Qingling quickly patted his back and hugged him even tighter. This time, old lady He was afraid of being beaten again, so she quickly shook off everything she knew. Originally, during the day, a masked woman in red quietly found Hitsuelan and told her that Zhao Yuanwei from the neighboring town was secretly marrying her deceased granddaughter, asking her to sell Zhao Shaoxian. Upon hearing this, Qingling suddenly became angry. It was her again. The woman in red who killed the original owner. Qingling finally glanced at the few people who had been beaten to death, and turned around with Zhao Shaoxian into the yard. Son, hurry up and bring all the valuable things at home. We'll leave overnight. Mom, where are we going? Beijing. Qingling doesn't plan to stay here anymore. She has offended too many people, and that person surnamed Xiao may catch up at any time. Now, with 30.6 strategies, running is the top strategy. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Enter the room and face off on the spot. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Enter the room and face off on the spot. When Xiao Rongjin was severely injured by Qingling's life treasure, the white bone umbrella, and woke up from a coma, it was already a month later. Crown Prince, you have finally woken up. Watching Xiao Rongjin open his eyes, Xiao Wei choked up and shouted. Unexpectedly, the first sentence spoken by Xiao Rongjin was, "Did you catch anyone? Where's the jade pendant?" Upon hearing this, Xiao felt even more like crying. The Crown Prince. What happened? After Xiao Rongjin realized it, she keenly realized that Zhao's only emotion was not right. Xiao Wei dared not conceal anything at all, he said sorrowfully with his bright red eyes open. Half a month ago, the front line was defeated, and both the prince and the third prince died in battle. What? Upon hearing this, Xiao Rongjin's pupils contracted violently. He tightly covered his heart, his face turned pale, and he gasped for breath. After a while, he looked up at Xiao Weiwei wearily and spoke in a hoarse voice. You immediately withdraw all the secret guards from the prince's mansion in Zhenbei and transfer all the industries under my control. The speed should be fast and not let the people above notice at all. Yes, Crown Prince, I will do it immediately. Xiao Wei's heart was full of energy. Even if he had doubts, he didn't hesitate to ask questions and took orders to leave. At this moment, Qingling and Zhao Shaoxian went straight to the capital. After a month of long-distance travel, they finally arrived at the door of the royal marquis' mansion. Mother, is this the imperial marquis' mansion? Looking at the magnificent courtyard of the imperial marquis' mansion, Zhao Xiaoshuan's face turned red with excitement. Qingling quickly pulled Zhao Shaoxian to the open space opposite the marquis' mansion and quietly comforted him. Son, be steady, don't get excited. We are here to come and ask for punishment. We need to have a strong presence and not be like country bumpkins. On the way here, Qingling had already figured out that no matter what the truth was about her original body being killed, she would have made this matter clear and straightforward. Otherwise, facing endless pursuit, her and her son's future life would not be peaceful. The mother and son waited for a long time until dusk when the sedan chair of the imperial marquis finally appeared. Qingling immediately ran forward to stop the sedan chair, and Zhao Shaoxian rolled to the ground, crying and shouting. The royal marquis' mansion is killing. help. Killing. Wow, wow, wow. The Imperial Marquis's mansion is taking people's lives lightly. Wow 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 wow. The sudden cry made the Marquis Fu Sun in the sedan suddenly confused. After realizing it, he frowned and shouted in a deep voice. Who is being reckless here? Speaking, he lifted the sedan curtain and looked over angrily. Yu Guanyang. With just one glance, Fu Sun was stunned. The memory of his death suddenly came back to life at this moment, drowning him completely. The main hall of the Marquis's mansion. Do you think our Imperial Marquis's mansion is too hasty in dealing with people's lives? Lady Li of the Imperial Marquis had a fierce expression on her face, her eyes fixed on Lu Qingling. Lu Qingling patted Zhao Shaoxian in her arms, whose face had turned pale from fear, and calmly replied. A month ago, someone came from afar to Cloud City under the banner of the Imperial Marquis's mansion to murder a civilian girl. What? Someone's going to kill you. Before Lu Qingling could finish speaking, Marquis Yu jumped up from his chair with a surprised expression on his face. The excited reaction of Marquis Yu caused both Li and Lu Qingling to turn their heads and look over. Master, you, sir, madam, Miss has come over. At this moment, the little maid's voice suddenly sounded, interrupting Li's words. Upon hearing the sound, Lu Qingling turned her head and looked around. In the next moment, she saw a young girl in red dress coming gracefully. Fu Rui entered slowly and was about to speak when she looked up and suddenly saw the face that was looking at her. Her eyes widened in fear, as if she had seen a ghost. Between her four eyes, Lu Qingling was also stunned. The face of the person in front of her quickly overlapped with the face in her memory that had killed the original owner. Surprisingly, it was her who committed the crime. Miss Yu Bohu Mansion. This is too coincidental, she brought it up herself. Thinking of this, Lu Qingling quickly regained her senses and turned her head to say to the Marquis of the Imperial Palace. Marquis, the person who killed the women of the people is the one in front of you. Rui. Mississippi. Marquis Yu and the Li family were both stunned. Upon hearing this, Fu Rui's heart skipped a beat. She lowered her head and cursed inwardly. When she looked up again, she already looked innocent. Miss, I don't even know you, why do we say we kill someone? As she spoke, she turned her head to look at the Marquis Yu and asked in confusion. Father, isn't this person suffering from some kind of madness? Seeing the wealth and status of our Marquis's mansion, he casually came up with an excuse to climb up. Li also furrowed her brows and followed closely as she spoke. Miss is the legitimate daughter of my Imperial Marquis's mansion. Miss Xiao cannot unjustly accuse anyone. Since Lu Qingling dared to come to the door to question and punish, she was certainly well prepared. She took out something from her sleeve and presented it directly to Lady Ho Li. Madam, please take a look. This is a jade bracelet that was torn off between the daughter of the commoner and the young lady at the top of the cliff that day. Li opened her handkerchief and saw several fragments of blood-red jade bracelets wrapped inside. Upon seeing this fragment, Marquis Yu's face immediately darkened. He turned his head and shouted angrily at Fu Rui. Damn girl, why don't you confess from the truth? Fu Rui, who had already had a solution, immediately spoke with a look of grievance on her face. Father, mother, daughter is wronged. This jade bracelet was lost a month ago on her way to the ancestral home outside Yuncheng. My daughter really doesn't know why the jade bracelet appeared here again. Moreover, my daughter doesn't even know this woman. She has framed her daughter in all sorts of ways, so she must have ulterior motives. Lu Qingling looked coldly at the eloquent woman in front of her, who was about to speak up when Lady Ho Li suddenly said something. Miss, I remember this blood jade red bracelet was a relic of the late lady and your own mother. You are usually very precious, how could you easily lose it? Fu Rui, is this how I usually teach you? You lying wicked woman, kneel down for me. The imperial Uncle Ho was shocked and angry. How could such a clumsy lie fool him, a veteran of officialdom? Father. Fu Rui was suddenly shocked and aggrieved in her heart. She didn't understand why her father would repeatedly favor an outsider today. With just one side of the other person's words, she easily believed her words. At this moment, Lu Qingling was also surprised. Has the original wife of the Marquis of the Imperial Palace passed away? Is Madame Ho the stepmother now? Is this young lady the daughter of the late lady? She seems to have accidentally gotten involved in someone else's house drama. Thinking of this, she turned her head to look at her stepmother Li and spoke up. There is still evidence for the civilian women. What evidence? Girl, but it doesn't matter. Li's face was fair and selfless. On that day, the young lady was taken up the mountain by the young lady. When she was at the top of the cliff, the young lady grabbed her neck. When the young lady resisted, she not only took off the young lady's jade bracelet, but also severely scratched her wrist and neck. Upon hearing this, Li suddenly turned her head to look at Fu Rui kneeling on the ground and shouted coldly. Someone, go check the young lady's neck and wrists. Upon hearing this, Fu Rui immediately reflexively covered her neck and shouted fiercely towards the two women who walked by. Mrs. Body is also something you servants can see. Get out of my way, don't be reckless. However, Fu Rui's intimidation did not scare the woman next to Lady Ho. The two of them quickly walked over and held down Fu Rui. Stop it. You guys are so surprised. Fu Rui struggled while shouting, and as the three of them tugged and tugged, they only heard a loud tear. The silk collar was torn open a big hole, and the deep scars on Fu Rui's fair and tender neck were immediately exposed in everyone's sight. Not good, Marquis, Madam, not good. Suddenly, a servant crawled and ran in shouting loudly. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Dreams of wealth disappear, homerobbing in exile. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Dreams of wealth and prosperity are shattered, and families are plundered and exiled. Marquis, it's not good. The commander of the Imperial Guard led someone to break in. What? Yuba Hodun stood up in shock. Immediately after, a leaning figure, wearing armor and holding a long sword, walked in, followed by a group of eunuchs announcing orders. With a glance in his eyes, Nanming Yen unexpectedly saw a familiar figure in the hall. He was only stunned for a moment, then shouted in a deep voice. Marquis Yu came forward to receive the order. At this moment, Marquis Yu's heart was pounding and he quickly stepped forward and knelt down. Seeing this, everyone knelt down along with them. Lu Qingling pulled Zhao Xian, and the mother and son knelt in the corner, bowing their heads. In accordance with heaven's destiny, the emperor's edict reads. After investigation, it has been found that King Shao Qianhui of Zhenbei had connections with external enemies, betrayed the country and sought glory, but the Imperial Marquis' mansion did not report the situation and exchanged views. I am grateful for the outstanding contributions made by the ancestors of the Imperial Marquis' mansion. Now, I will only deprive the Imperial Marquis of his official rank and title, demote him to a commoner, and in order to redeem him, I will order the Imperial Marquis and his female relatives to be exiled for 3,000 miles. If they are pardoned, they will not be pardoned. I am honored. The voice of eunuchs and spies echoed through the hall. Fu Sun's face turned pale as he trembled as he took the imperial edict and pressed his forehead against the ground. My lord, thank you to the emperor for your kindness. Seeing this, Fu Rui and Li Shi, who had just been fighting fiercely, collapsed to the ground in an instant, both incredulous. As the imperial guards were ordered to raid homes and arrest people, the entire Imperial Marquis' mansion was immediately filled with cries and cries. Fu Rui watched as the Imperial Guards approached her, and her heart was filled with resentment. Her hard work was wasted, and she was unwilling to accept it. Suddenly, she stood up and turned her head to point at Lu Qingling, shouting loudly. She is also a daughter of the Imperial Marquis' mansion, we need to catch her together. As soon as the words fell, Fu Sun rushed to him and slapped him with such force that he flipped Fu Rui over and said urgently. The little girl suddenly developed hysteria and was talking nonsense. Miss Xiao is not from our Marquis's mansion, so adults don't need to pay attention to her. Fu Rui twisted her body from the fan and fell to the ground. After realizing it, she covered her face and cried loudly. I'm not talking nonsense, Zhao Yinong is indeed the daughter of the Marquis's mansion. Seeing this, Lu Qingling's eyebrows and eyes froze. Miss Fu, my daughter has always had no grudges or grievances with you. Why do you insist on killing my daughter 3 or 4 times? Fu Rui looked fiercely at Lu Qingling. I have evidence here. Don't try to escape. Speaking, he took out a letter from his long sleeve and stood up to hand it to Nanming Yen. Nanming Yen opened it for a moment and then handed it to Fu Sun. Marquis you can watch for yourself. Fu Sun took over and took a look. After a few breaths, he was shocked because it was the handwriting of her original wife Lin Qing. It turned out to be a final letter from a bedridden hospital, revealing that when she gave birth to twins at her mother's house in Yunqing that day, she gave birth to a pair of twins. Unexpectedly, the eldest child was a stillborn. In order not to be criticized, she sent someone to quietly throw away the stillborn child. Later, she accidentally discovered that the stillborn child had not died and had been picked up by a rural family for more than 10 years. When Fu Sun saw the names Zhao Yinong, Zhao Gui, and He Tsuelan mentioned in the letter, he suddenly crumpled the letter into a ball and turned his head to say to Lu Qingling. Yinong, you are indeed my daughter of Fu Sun. You and Rui, a mother and a compatriot, are your own sisters. A mother's compatriot. Lu Qingling turned her head to look at Fu Rui and guessed in her heart that the reason she insisted on killing the original owner was because she didn't want the original owner to come back and fight for property. Just as he was stunned, he heard Fu Sun speak to Nanming Inkstone again. Commander Nan, the daughter of our mansion has already been engaged to you. Unfortunately, our Marquis's mansion has encountered difficulties this time and we cannot offer her a dignified wedding. We only hope that you can take her away and treat her well in the future. Upon hearing this, Fu Rui quickly turned her head and looked over. Unexpectedly, after the Marquis of the Imperial Palace finished speaking, she waved at Lu Qingling and shouted. Yinong, come over here. This scene stunned everyone. Fu Rui immediately rushed forward and shouted loudly. Father, Nanming Yan's fiancé Ae is clearly me. You can't do this. Seeing this, Nanming Yan hesitated for a moment and spoke low. My mother has already chosen another marriage for me. Upon hearing this, the whole room fell silent, even the noisy Fu Rui was bewildered. Nanming Yan refused on the spot, cutting off Lu Qingling's retreat. The Imperial Marquis's mansion was robbed on the spot, including Lu Qingling. All the masters were imprisoned. Nanming Inkstone. You heartless person, heartless person. In the dimly lit prison cell, Fu Rui cried out like a madman. The whole cell was filled with sobs and cries. Lu Qingling sat in the corner holding Zhao Xiaoxian, who looked over with a gloomy expression. Mom, are we going to be exiled? Lu Qingling didn't expect the situation to develop so dramatically. It wasn't until she figured out her identity that people followed suit. She lowered her head and sighed. The identity of the mother has already been confirmed, and she can't run away. Of course, Lu Qingling can run, but if she does, Zhao Xiaoxian will no longer be able to participate in the imperial examination and become an official, which is equivalent to ruining his future. Instead, it's better to go into exile with the team and make plans when he arrives at the place. Thinking of this, she spoke up to comfort. Son, don't be afraid, just treat it as a trip. You know my mother's ability and won't let you suffer anymore. Well, mother, as long as I follow you, it doesn't matter where Xiaoxian goes. Zhao Xiaoxian nodded and looked at Lu Qingling with dependence. After spending a month together day and night, Zhao Shaoxian has clearly realized that his mother has had another experience. With his mother's current abilities, the two of them will not suffer wherever they go. In the latter half of the night, to Lu Qingling's surprise, Nanming Inkstone quietly touched it. Southern Commander is here to force me to hand over the Jade pendant. Lu Qingling took the initiative. Nanming Yen was taken aback and shook his head. Speaking of this Jade pendant, Miss Zhao may not be aware of its origin. Rome Nanmu will first tell Miss Zhao a story. Before Lu Qingling could respond, Nanming Yen said on her own. More than 20 years ago, the Protectorate General's mansion and the Jinbei Prince's mansion agreed to have their children and daughters-in-law. Afterwards, the Protectorate General personally invited a master to carve a pair of jade pendants, one for the young master who had not yet been born in the general's mansion, and the other for the crown prince of the Jinbei Prince's mansion. Unfortunately, in a disaster of annihilation, the young master who was still in the general's wife's belly returned to the underworld with his soul, and these two jade pendants were left with only one. Upon hearing this, Lu Qingling suddenly realized that the reason why someone surnamed Xiao persisted in pursuing the jade pendant was not only because it was a betrothal token, but also because it carried a blood case. Nanming Yen saw that Lu Qingling understood and took the opportunity to say. Ming Yen just hopes that the girl can agree to the next request for the sake of the jade pendant. With a whisper in her ear, Lu Qingling furrowed her brow after listening. Southern Commander, why don't you personally take action? Nanming Yen gave a bitter smile. Miss, I don't know. Our Beiding Marquis' mansion is also involved in this case. If it weren't for the Empress Dowager De and the palace's desperate plea to the Empress Dowager, Ming Yen might have ended up with the same fate as Miss at this moment. In the daytime, Ming Yen did not refuse to save himself, but rather his marriage was already a transaction to rescue the Duke of Beiding's mansion. At this point, suddenly there was a sound of footsteps outside the cell. Nanming Yen quickly stuffed something into Lu Qingling's hand, dropped a sentence, and then turned around to leave quickly. Please, girl. Lu Qingling lowered her head and looked at the thick stack of silver bills in her hand, sighing lightly. What a wicked fate. Then I thought of exile imminent, and it was the right thing to start by getting some supplies. The space was in hand, so not using it would not be a waste. So Lu Qingling took out a small paper figure from the space and blew a breath of spiritual energy towards it. As the paper figure transformed into her, lying in a dark corner, hugging the sleeping Zhao Shaoxian, she secretly sneaked out of the prison. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Empty 2 prefectures and bring millions of supplies on the road. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. Empty 2 prefectures and bring millions of supplies on the road. Following the memories of the day, Lu Qingling first arrived at the Imperial Marquis' mansion. At this moment, a large number of guards had been removed from the Imperial Marquis' mansion, leaving only the financial personnel to be counted and registered with the Ministry of Revenue. When Lu Qingling sneaked in, she first went to the big kitchen in the mansion. It happened that these days it was the day for the royal Marquis' house to make a big purchase. The huge warehouse was filled with piles of rice, flour and edible oil, and fans of pork, mutton, beef, even chickens, ducks and geese were killed. The delicacies of mountains and seas, flying in the sky, swimming in the sea, walking on the ground, growing in the fields, and Lu Qingling were not spared. Even the steamed stuffed buns, mantou, cakes, and steamers were all served in one pot. Lu Qingling's speed was extremely fast. Wherever her divine sense swept through, in the slightest movement of her mind, she swept all valuable things into the jade pendant space, the inner and outer courtyards, the rooms of the ladies, and even the important warehouses and study of the Marquis' mansion. After a thorough sweep of the Imperial Marquis' mansion, Lu Qingling realized that the Northern Prince's mansion in Bai Rili had also been raided. Therefore, she immediately launched her divine consciousness and searched for the past. King Shao Qianhuai of Jinbei colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country, and his mansion was an important place for investigation. Therefore, after the masters and servants of the mansion were imprisoned, the royal guards stayed behind. Under the watchful eye of the Jin Wei, Lu Qingling sneaked into the main kitchen of the Jinbei prince's mansion. Coincidentally, the kitchen had made a lot of purchases in the past few days to prepare for the funeral banquet of the Jinbei prince. Before she could even start preparing the ingredients, the prince's mansion was surrounded. The large kitchen of the prince's mansion in Jinbei is more imposing than that of the imperial marquis's mansion, and the ingredients are also more high-end and rich. Lu Qingling started from the kitchen and walked through the inner and outer courtyards of the prince's mansion. Naturally, the study and warehouse of the prince in Jinbei were also not overlooked. After the material search was completed, Lu Qingling reached out her hand and a flame suddenly burst out of her palm. With a slight movement of her mind, she saw that the flame quickly split into two and shot straight towards both the imperial marquis's mansion and the Jinbei prince's mansion. At the moment when the fire was raging, Lu Qingling, who had been completely destroyed, flew away and fled. However, after returning to the cell, she was only stunned for a short while before being kicked out of the cell by the prison guards and officially embarked on the path of exile. At this moment, snowflakes were fluttering in the sky, and a cold wind blew on the face, making people shiver and shiver. Lu Qingling held Zhao Xiaoxian, who was sleeping soundly, in her arms as she walked, scrutinizing the exiled team. The team consisted of several hundred people, and the man's hands and feet were heavily shackled with anklets. His clothes were also very thin. Due to the deliberate use of water by Nanming Yen during the process of copying households, the exiles from the imperial marquis's mansion were all wearing thick cotton clothes and carrying packages. Compared to those from other mansions, their situation was much better. When the team of several hundred people arrived at a crossroads, they were divided into 3 teams, all heading in different directions. However, Lu Qingling's team only had 5 to 6 dozen people left, and as they were about to leave the capital of Chu, everyone stopped and turned their heads, their eyes filled with pain and reluctance. "All right. Don't look anymore. Hurry up and leave. We're on a 3,000-mile exile road, and everyone must arrive within the specified time. Today we're going 50 miles, hurry up and don't procrastinate." Captain Lu Xiong, the official officer escorting the fugitive, said as he swung his whip fiercely into the air. In an instant, a burst of sobbing accompanied by the sound of iron chains rang out again. As the snow grew heavier and heavier, the sky and earth were covered in a layer of snow-white. After walking for an unknown amount of time, Princess Yu of Jinbei's face turned pale and weak. Seeing her eldest daughter carrying her eldest son and stumbling in her footsteps, she quickly spoke up and wanted to replace her. "Jinyang, give me Rongjin and I'll carry her." "Mom, no need, I can still carry it." Xiao Jinyang gritted her teeth and refused. Her mother was weak and couldn't carry her elder brother on her back. "Jinyang, if you can't hold on anymore, you must tell your mother." "I know, mother." Xiao Rongs, who had been lowering his head all the way, listened and rolled his eyes out of breath. "Mom, big sister, why don't you speak less and save your energy? Don't expect me when I can't move my back anymore. I'm weak since I was young, but I can't move my back, big brother. Besides, big brother's legs. Little sister, stop talking. What's wrong? I haven't said anything yet." "Xiao Rongs, please shut up." "Mother, Xiao Rongs was about to talk back when a sharp pain suddenly came from her back. She shouted and turned around, only to see an official holding a whip and whipping at her. Stop it." Xiao Rongjin lay on Xiao Jinyang's back, grabbing the whip he had swung with one hand and looking at the perpetrator with a cold expression on his face. The official didn't expect anyone to dare to resist, he glared and said fiercely. "If you have become an exiled person, then you are a prisoner, disobeying orders and daring to resist. I see you are tired of living." As she spoke, she grabbed the whip and pulled hard. Xiao Jinyang, who was already bending over with Xiao Rongjin on her back, was unsteadily thrown towards the ground by the strong pull. Rongjin. Princess Yu of Zhenbei saw her eldest son being thrown to the ground by her eldest daughter and screamed before rushing forward. Unexpectedly, another whip hit her, and Yu immediately screamed out in fear. Ah! Stop it! As a cold drink sounded, the whip that flew into the air was suddenly cut in two by a hairpin that came over. Lu Qingling didn't expect that shortly after setting off, a moth appeared. After cutting off the whip, she lifted her foot and was about to go over, but suddenly her arm was grabbed by someone. Zhao Yinong. What do you care about them for? Are you trying to kill us? Can you stop it? Fu Rui looked at the sister who had just been forced to recognize her with hatred. She was really a troublemaker. Li also strongly disagrees with opposing officials. Their identities are different from before, and it's better to do less than to do more. Xiao Rongjin, who fell to the ground, grabbed the rope tightly with one hand and looked at Lu Qingling with a surprised expression. How could she be here? Lu Qingling originally didn't want to meddle in her affairs. Who knew that her spatial jade pendant was related to someone else, and she couldn't hand over the jade pendant? She had to take care of them more along the way. Besides, if we were to talk about who harmed who, Fu Rui was the least qualified to say that. She was the one who caused her to fall to this point. Thinking of this, Lu Qingling didn't turn her head back and turned her arm and elbow back hard. It's none of your business. Hiss, you. Fu Rui immediately covered her chest in pain and squatted down, her face turning mostly white. Lu Qingling, who had broken free from her constraints, hugged Zhao Xiaoxian and strode towards Xiao Rongjin. The official turned his head and looked over angrily. As soon as he saw Lu Qingling's extremely beautiful face, a mischievous smile appeared on her face like a magic trick. How could he bear to whip such a beautiful woman? Shouldn't I hold on to my arms and feel pain? Thinking of this, he smiled and said. Young lady, are you here to plead for mercy? As long as you agree to my request, I. Ah. Before the official could finish speaking, the person shouted and flew out. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. I'm here to help you. Are you going to rebel? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. I'm here to help you. Are you going to rebel? Lu Qingling was taken aback for a moment. She hadn't even started yet, so why did this official fly away? She turned her head to look at Xiao Rongjin on the ground, only to see that the other party was helped up by Yu Shi and a woman. What are you doing? The head of the official, Lu Xiong, heard the shouting of his subordinates and walked over angrily, waving his whip. Boss, they don't obey the discipline and dare to attack me. You must be ruthless. Ah. Li Si, who fell to the ground, corrected his words and then let out another scream. Lu Qingling is now certain that neither she nor the person surnamed Xiao has taken any action. Someone is helping them in the dark. Lu Xiong also noticed and looked thoughtfully at Xiao Rongjin, thinking to himself that even if someone of this status were exiled, they would not easily offend them. Thinking of this, he looked impatiently at his subordinates. Roll on, it's delayed today's itinerary. I want you to look good. And you guys, hurry up and don't procrastinate. Boss. Seeing that he was still talking, Lu Xiong remained calm and Copper Bell's big eyes glared fiercely, which frightened Li Si even more. Due to Lu Xiong's warning, Li Si dared not take any more action. He gave a gloomy glare to the embarrassed Xiao Rongjin and then limped away. Xiao Rongjin looked at Lu Qingling with a cold expression on her face. How could you be here? Lu Qingling withdrew her divine consciousness from the forest and looked at Xiao Rongjin. Let me introduce myself. I am currently the daughter of the Imperial Marquis's mansion, Fu Yinong. Xiao Rongjin couldn't understand its meaning. Xiao Jinyang on one side quickly explained when she saw this. This girl is the eldest lady recognized by the Imperial Marquis's mansion only yesterday, and is a fellow mother of the second young lady Fu Rui. Upon hearing this, Xiao Rongjin's expression was inexplicable. Lu Qingling is not in the mood to guess whether he is complaining about her at the moment. She quickly takes out a small porcelain bottle the size of her thumb from her sleeve and puts it into Xiao Rongjin's hand, whispering. This pill can temporarily suppress toxins in your body, and after taking it, it can last for 6 months. After finishing speaking, Lu Qingling caught a glimpse of Xiao Rongjin's sudden expression and quickly added a sentence. Don't worry, I was entrusted by someone to help you. Who is it? Nanming Inkstone. Xiao Rongjin was desperately tampering with the small porcelain vase in his hand, his heart shaking uncontrollably. In addition to being known by the close guards and Nan Mingyan, there was also the White Divine Doctor involved in the highly poisonous matter in his body. It is impossible for Nan Mingyan to have this kind of medicine, and the White Divine Doctor has already traveled all over the world to search for the medicine to lure him. So how did the woman in front of her know that she was extremely poisonous and happened to have the medicine? When Xiao Rongjin came to his senses and was about to ask more questions, Lu Qingling had already led Zhao Xiaoxian back to the ranks of the Imperial Marquis's mansion. Fu Rui bit her lips tightly and looked at Lu Qingling beside her with a look of hatred. The Prince of Zhenbei colluded with the enemy and betrayed the country. Although he had already died on the battlefield, as long as Xiao Rongjin did not die for a day, the higher authorities would not let them go. If you want to die, just join in. Of course, Lu Qingling knew this truth. As the only living man in the Zhenbei prince's mansion, Xiao Rongjin would definitely be accompanied by constant assassinations in the future. However, this man was not without means. He had already arranged everything. Lu Qingling used her divine sense to investigate and found that the one who had just made a secret move was the dark guard who had been following him all along, and she also noticed several waves of people secretly following this team. While Lu Qingling was pondering, Zhao Xiaoxian on one side saw Fu Rui glaring fiercely at his mother. He also stared back with wide eyes, big and small, playing with eye contact across Lu Qingling. Lu Qingling, who had regained her senses, coldly glanced at Fu Rui with a piercing voice. Take care of yourself. If you dare to provoke me again, I will chop off your claws. You. Upon hearing this, Fu Rui gritted her teeth in anger. Zhao Xiaoxian saw that his own mother had won the argument and made a smirk at Fu Rui, whose face was twisted with pride, causing her to tilt up in anger. Seeing this, Lu Qingling chuckled and patted his head. Due to the heavy shackles on the hands and feet of the men in front of the team was moving at a very slow speed. Coupled with the heavy snowfall and the howling cold wind, everyone was soon frozen blue and their hands and feet were slow. However, at this point, they had not even reached half of the distance, and the team was slowly being pulled longer and longer. Seeing this, Lu Xiong repeatedly urged him. Hurry up, everyone, speed up. Make sure to walk 50 miles before it gets dark, otherwise you'll miss your accommodation. You'll have to camp in the wilderness tonight. Everyone panicked and they heard about camping in the wilderness. With such heavy snow, if they slept in the snow overnight, they were afraid they would freeze to death, so they all accelerated their pace. Fu Yubai's small body was trembling, and he looked up at Li Shi, struggling to speak. Mom, I'm so tired. I can't walk anymore. Lady Li, the wife of the Marquis of the Imperial Marquis, could no longer walk. Listening to her son's crying, she could only comfort her wearily. Be good, I can't hold you anymore. Hold on for a while longer, it's coming soon. Mom, I'm dying. I'm so hungry and tired. I can't walk anymore. Mom, I want you to hold me, I'm not leaving. 5-year-old Fu Yubai didn't care about these things at all. When he heard Li's refusal, he immediately burst into tears. Li, a wealthy lady in a deep mansion, had never walked such a long way before. At this moment, her physical strength was at the end of her strength, and with Fu Yubai's constant crying, she couldn't persuade her well. Her emotions suddenly collapsed, and she immediately hugged Fu Yubai and burst into tears. Woo 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 woo. Li's cry caused the exhausted women in the team to burst into tears. As Lu Xiong watched the snow getting heavier and heavier, he was worried that he wouldn't be able to walk 50 miles today. When he heard those sobbing cries, he immediately became angry and shouted loudly. "Shut up, don't cry, hurry up and leave. I'm not leaving, I want my mother to hold me, I'm not leaving." Fu Yubai cried fiercely and refused to leave even if he said anything. Seeing this, Lu Xiong completely lost his patience and grabbed his whip, fiercely whipping towards the two of them. Just as the whip was about to hit Li Shi, Lu Qingling, who was standing on the side, suddenly grabbed it from the air and the whip was pulled by her. "What are you doing?" Suddenly being whipped away by someone, Lu Xiong was both surprised and angry. Lu Qingling also didn't want to offend the official leader, but things went against her wishes. If she didn't take action, if this whip were to hit Li and Fu Yubai, they might not be able to live to exile. Thinking of this, Lu Qingling immediately activated her spiritual energy and crushed the whip in her hand. This scene stunned everyone. Lu Xiong's gaze suddenly became heavy, and the woman's strength was far superior to him. Faced with the calm and composed Lu Qingling, Lu Xiong took a deep breath, quickly calmed his mind, and asked. "What do you want? Can't you rebel?" Lu Qingling shook her head. "It's simple, you agree to my request." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. How dare you threaten our boss? Are you tired of living? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. How dare you threaten our boss? Are you tired of living? Due to Lu Qingling's intervention, all the officials escorting the fugitives gathered around in a fierce manner, and the team slowly stopped. Li tightly hugged Fu Yubai, who had already been scared to death, and her eyes turned red as she looked at Lu Qingling, who was facing off against the official. At this moment, Xiao Rongjin, who was lying on Xiao Jinyang's back, suddenly spoke in a low voice. "Go and take a look." Upon hearing this, Xiao Jinyang was taken aback. "Rongjin, in the past." Before Xiao Jinyang could finish speaking, Xiao Rongjin interrupted her without hesitation. With a hesitant expression, Xiao Jinyang turned her head to look at Princess Yu of Zhenbei. Yu nodded as she remembered that the girl had helped them just now. After Xiao Jinyang slowly moved over with Xiao Rongjin behind her back, she just heard Lu Qingling speak. "My request is very simple, that is not to hit people without reason." Upon hearing this request, Lu Xiong, who had originally looked solemn, was quite surprised. He thought she was taking the opportunity to seek benefits for him, but to his surprise, it was for the sake of being an accomplice. Lu Xiongzhong suddenly breathed a sigh of relief and was about to agree when a voice suddenly came in. "No, boss, we can't agree to her." Li Siging found an opportunity to teach this girl a lesson this time. He couldn't wait to jump out and looked fiercely at Lu Qingling. "All exiled prisoners' lives and deaths are in the hands of our boss. How dare you still threaten our boss? Are you tired of living?" The Imperial Marquis Fu, who hurriedly rushed over from the front of the team, immediately asked for mercy. Unexpectedly, before she could speak, Lu Qingling suddenly took action and quickly grabbed Li Siging's neck, speaking lightly. "I think you're tired of living." As he spoke, he immediately lifted the person up and threw it out high. All of this happened too quickly, and even the fast official Captain Lu Xiong didn't react. With a loud bang, Li Si slammed heavily onto the ground, and Lu Xiong's brow furrowed fiercely. "You, cough, cough, cough. You." Just as Lu Xiong uttered a sentence, Li Siging, who had been knocked unconscious, suddenly covered his neck and coughed violently. Seeing that the person was not dead, Lu Xiong breathed a sigh of relief. He turned his head to look at Lu Qingling and spoke up. "I promise you that I won't hit someone for no reason, but you must also agree to my request." Say. Do not take action against officials without permission. The group of people under Lu Xiong's command were all cultivated by him, and he didn't want all the people in his hands to be slaughtered after going through countless hardships to the place of exile. Lu Qingling nodded in agreement without even thinking. Sure. Seeing that both sides had reached an agreement, everyone breathed a great sigh of relief. The exiled prisoners were extremely grateful for Lu Qingling's help at this moment. It should be noted that on the road of exile, not only were the bad weather and distant distance, but also the beating of officials was one of the reasons that led to the death of the prisoners. Seeing this, Fu Sun's eyebrows furrowed deeply. Nong, this road is high and far, with many dangers. Dad hopes you must protect yourself and not worry about anything else. Upon hearing this, Li and Fu Rui on one side immediately changed their expressions. Li hugged Fu Yubai with a sorrowful expression on her face. Master Fu Rui also had a face of resentment. Dad, do you only care about your sister's safety and don't care about us at all? Fu Rui is really infuriated. She has been the daughter of Fu Sun for 20 years, can't she compare to this fool who brought it back? Is blood relationship really that important? What is the point of everything she has done? Compared to the desolation and resentment of the two, Lu Qingling's emotions remained calm. She tightly held on to Zhao Xiaoxian, nodded faintly, and turned around, just in time to meet the probing gaze of Xiao Rongjin. Lu Qingling raised her eyebrows and looked up and down before suddenly speaking. You didn't eat what I gave you. Xiao Rongjin didn't answer the rhetorical question. Where's the jade pendant? These three words immediately choked Lu Qingling. This scumbag is really, when has it been? He's still chasing after her for a jade pendant. If she doesn't return the jade pendant, isn't this scumbag planning to never let her go for a lifetime? Thinking of this, Lu Qingling reached out and threw a jade pendant from her sleeve. Give it back to you. You stingy guy. Xiao Rongjin reached out to take it, lowered his head, and instantly turned black. He raised his eyes and glared angrily at Lu Qingling. Are you playing with me? No, isn't this the jade pendant you want? Lu Qingling's face was as normal, but her heart was shocked. It was the same jade pendant that she imitated according to her own space. How could he see the difference? Xiao Rongjin directly shattered the jade pendant and pointed to the shattered jade pendant, saying to Lu Qingling. This jade pendant was originally stained with blood, and its interior is not so pure and flawless. 20 years ago, the wife of the Protector General received news of the general's death on the battlefield, and was stimulated to give birth prematurely. When the princess of Zhenbei, Yu, rushed over with the 5-year-old Xiao Rongjin, the general's wife, who was only breathing at the time, tightly held the jade pendant in Xiao Rongjin's hand and said 3 words before dying. This jade pendant, stained with the blood of the general's wife, has since had an extremely delicate bloodstain circulating within it, which cannot be detected without careful examination. Lu Qingling was aware of it, but she didn't expect Xiao Rongjin's gaze to be so sharp that it was immediately recognized. She had known that she had put some blood into it when it was first replicated. At this moment, facing Xiao Rongjin's questioning, Lu Qingling could not admit it and played tricks. I took this jade pendant back then. If you don't believe me, there's nothing I can do. Upon seeing this, Xiao Jinyang also followed in persuading. Rongjin, I don't think Miss Lu is that kind of person. There may be some misunderstanding here. Upon hearing this, Lu Qingling immediately felt embarrassed. She was just that kind of person, and this girl had taken a wrong look. Seeing that everyone had already gone far, Lu Xiong stared closely at them not far away, and Lu Qingling quickly changed the topic. Hurry up, if you delay any longer, you'll get whipped. After speaking, he quickly walked forward with Zhao Xiaoxian. Seeing this, Princess Yu of Zhenbei also spoke up to urge her. Jinyang, let's hurry up too. Xiao Rongjin lay on Xiao Jinyang's back, his gaze fixed on Lu Qingling's back with a faint gaze. Zhao Xiaoxian turned around and glanced at him. Xiao Rongjin met his gaze, and he was momentarily stunned. How could there be a sense of familiarity? Zhao Xiaoxian only took a quick glance and quickly withdrew his gaze. Therefore, Xiao Rongjin only thought that he had taken a glance and did not take it to heart. The journey was full of wind and snow, and a group of people finally came to a stop after enduring the most difficult 30-mile journey. Rest in place for half an hour, you can't go far anymore. After banging the gong and shouting once, Lu Xiong stopped caring about this group of fugitives. Xiao Rongjin asked Xiao Jinyang to place him next to Lu Qingling. As soon as he sat down, he took out the thumb-sized porcelain bottle and was about to ask questions when Lu Qingling suddenly handed him something. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Today next year will be your anniversary. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Today next year will be your anniversary. Xiao Rongjin lowered his head and saw that Lu Qingling had another jade pendant in her hand. However, this jade pendant was not the one he was looking for, but rather the intimate jade pendant of Nanming Yen. Do you believe me now? It was Nanming Yen who secretly found me and asked me to take care of you. Speaking, Lu Qingling directly put the jade pendant into Xiao Rongjin's hand. This jade pendant is indeed a personal item of Nanming Inkstone. Xiao Rongjin will not admit it wrong. Even if he believes that she was entrusted by Nanming Inkstone, Xiao Rongjin must understand the origin of this medicine. He raised the porcelain bottle in his hand and asked, "Where did you find this medicine? How did you know that I was highly poisonous?" Without explanation, Lu Qingling reached out and grabbed Xiao Rongjin's wrist. With a flick of her fingers, she began to sense her pulse. After a few breaths, she slowly spoke up. The toxins in the body have already infiltrated the meridians and penetrated deep into the lungs. If it weren't for the strong internal power to suppress them, the poison might have already spread and died. Nevertheless, if you can't detoxify this poison within a year, today next year will be your day of death. Young Master Xiao, am I right or wrong? In fact, Lu Qingling didn't need to sense her pulse at all. With a sweep of her divine sense, she found that this person had already been poisoned into her heart. Lu Qingling's words completely shook Xiao Rongjin. 6 years ago, he was assassinated in Cloud City, not only poisoned, with both legs broken, but also destroyed a girl as a result. And the poison he was poisoned with was beyond the control of even the world-renowned white divine doctor. This woman not only diagnosed his symptoms, but also developed a pill that could suppress the toxin. Thinking of this, Xiao Rongjin looked over with a serious expression on his face. Are you really the daughter of the Marquis of the Imperial Household who has been exiled? Lu Qingling nodded. They said I am. Upon hearing this, Xiao Rongjin stopped speaking and rubbed the porcelain vase in his hand, lost in thought. Seeing this, Lu Qingling stopped paying attention to him and got up and walked to the nearby forest to start picking firewood. Mother, why did you save that uncle? Zhao Xiaoxian, who was following, squatted beside Lu Qingling and asked with a frown of confusion. Lu Qingling spoke in a warm voice to explain. One is because my mother took his things, and the other is because I was entrusted by someone to be loyal to them. Is that thing important to a mother? Yes, it's very important. Lu Qingling nodded. Zhao Xiaoxian pursed his lips and lowered his head in silence. The mother and son quickly picked up a pile of firewood, set it on fire, and everyone gathered around. Princess Yu, the princess of Zhenbei, was only wearing a thin single garment and her face had already turned blue from the cold. When the family was raiding, the Jin Yiwei's search was very strict, prohibiting them from carrying food and gold, silver, and jewelry. At this moment, when everyone else opened their packages and took out food, the people of the Zhenbei prince's mansion could only watch helplessly. Yu turned her head to look at the tired Xiao Jinyang and the motionless Xiao Rongjin, and said to her little daughter Xiao Rongs beside her. Sister, you stay here and guard your big brother. I'll find something to eat. Xiao Rongs was also extremely hungry. She looked at the forest covered in white snow, hesitated for a moment, and then nodded in agreement. Upon seeing this, Qingling did not stop her. She would only ensure that the people of the prince's mansion in Junbei were not bullied and would not take care of them. Xiao Rongjin looked into the forest, nodded inexplicably, and then withdrew his gaze. After settling down her only son Fu Yubai, Li Shi, the wife of the imperial uncle, took out a white mantle from her package and handed it to Qingling. "Inong, this is for you. Thank you for saving me and Yuer." Qingling waved her hand but did not stop. "Madam, you're welcome. We're all part of the same family, and there's no reason not to save our lives. Please take your things back quickly. This road is still long, so you need to save some food." As she spoke, Qingling took out 2 large buns from her own bundle and handed them to Zhao Shaoxian beside her, and also gave them to a nobleman named Fu Sun. On one side, Fu Ru suggested that both Li and Qingling brought food, while at that time, she only focused on packing some gold and silver treasures and jewelry, completely forgetting to pack food, and suddenly looked regretful. She looked at Fu Sun and let out a mournful shout. "Dad!" Fu Sun was about to start eating when he heard Fu Rui's voice. He looked up and saw his younger daughter's gaze fixed on the bun in his hand. He was about to give it to her, but his eldest daughter, who had just recognized it, suddenly said coldly, "She is not qualified to eat my food." Upon hearing Fu's inquiry, he was immediately stunned. Fu Rui was about to start arguing when suddenly a scream broke out in the woods. "Keep an eye on him." At the next moment, Qingling threw Zhao Shaoxian into Xiao Rongjin's arms and the person flashed out. At this moment, Yu Shi looked at the several black-clothed people rushing towards her with a frightened expression, screaming in fear. After realizing this, she ran out and shouted as she ran. "Help, help!" Yu was both shocked and scared. In a panic, she suddenly tripped and threw herself towards the ground. Seeing the sword in the black man's hand swing towards her, her eyes widened in fear. With a sudden clang, a long sword shot out from the forest behind her, directly flying the sword in the black-clothed man's hand. Then she was picked up by someone, turned around, and dodged the attack of the other 2 people. Startled, Yu turned her head and exclaimed in surprise. "Miss Fu!" Qingling hugged Yu Shi and flew over to take the long sword that was shot at her. With a backhand stroke, she cut a man in black's neck. The remaining black-clothed men rushed towards Qingling without saying a word. Qingling held Yu Shi in one hand and a long sword in the other, wandering among several black-clothed men like ghosts and ghosts. In an instant, she wiped the remaining few people's necks. When Lu Xiong rushed over with his men, he only saw the fallen body and Qingling holding the Yu family. Listening to the swords and screams emanating from deep in the forest, Lu Xiong said decisively, "Set off immediately and continue on the journey." Qingling hugged Yu Shi, whose legs had already weakened from fear, and quickly withdrew from the forest. When they ran in, Xiao Rongjin saw the long sword in Qingling's hand at a glance. His gaze looked deep into the forest with a solemn expression, unsure if Xiao and his companions could stop those waves of assassins. Lu Xiong rushed in without saying a word, swung his whip and swung it fiercely into the air, shouting loudly. "Get up quickly, keep going, hurry up, no dawdling." The unidentified fugitives suddenly became dissatisfied. "I just sat down, why do I have to leave again? Didn't I say to rest for half an hour?" "Yeah, I can't walk anymore, I'm not leaving." "I'm not leaving either, I'm exhausted." Li Shi saw Qingling coming out with the sword, and the sword was still dripping blood. She immediately realized that something was wrong. She quickly picked up Fu Yubai, who was still eating mantu, and shouted at Fu inquiry. "Master, let's go quickly." Fu Sun breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that Qingling was unharmed. Lu Xiong urged repeatedly, but when he saw someone not cooperating, he swung his whip and cursed. "Damn it, I'm not discussing with you guys. Let's go, if we don't go, I'll beat you to death." Stop fighting, I'll go, stop fighting. Let's go quickly." When others saw this, they quickly got up and dared not procrastinate anymore. Lu Qingling picked up Zhao Shaoxian and turned a blind eye to those who had been beaten. The official leader only promised her not to hit anyone casually, and these uncooperative people were not within this range. Just as Lu Qingling was about to turn around and leave, Xiao Jinyang suddenly exclaimed in surprise. "Mom, what's wrong with you?" End of this chapter. Chapter 10:10. You are a cripple, maybe you have taken a liking to someone else. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. 10. You are a cripple, maybe you have taken a liking to someone else. You experienced some fright. Her legs were very weak, and after walking for so long, she was tired and hungry, and couldn't even lift her spirits for a moment. Xiao Rongs saw everyone getting up one by one, and her mother was still lying on the ground. She became anxious for a moment and couldn't help but shout loudly. "Mom, hurry up and stop procrastinating. You'll be beaten again later. I can't walk anymore." You looked ashamed. Xiao Rongjin's gaze fell on his broken leg, and he clenched his fist with restraint. Lu Qingling sighed and put Zhao Shaoxian down, then squatted down in front of Xiao Rongjin. "Don't procrastinate, I'll carry you on my back." Xiao Rongjin took a deep look at Lu Qingling and leaned onto her back amidst the surprised gazes of several people. "You two support the queen, hurry up and leave." Lu Qingling carried Xiao Rongjin on her back, turned her head and threw a sentence at Xiao Jinyang and Xiao Rongs, and quickly followed the team with Zhao Shaoxian. Fu Ru, who had been secretly following Lu Qingling's advice, was secretly carrying Xiao Rongjin behind her back. She was furious for a moment and turned her head to complain to Fu on one side. "Dad, sister doing this will harm us. The prince's mansion in Junbei has already caused us to be exiled. If we get involved with them again, can we still reach the place of exile alive?" Upon hearing this, Fu Sun turned his head and looked over. When he saw Lu Qingling carrying Xiao Rongjin on her back, a hint of inexplicable emotion flashed in his eyes. After a while, he let out a light sigh. What should come is always unavoidable. "Rui, don't look, hurry up and leave." Fu Rui's heart suddenly became even angrier as she listened to these words. The heavy snow continued to fall, and a group of people rushed slowly until they finally saw a dilapidated temple a few miles away. Lu Xiong finally let go and let everyone rest again. As soon as they entered the dilapidated temple, everyone was exhausted and paralyzed. Lu Qingling placed Xiao Rongjin on the ground and asked him to guard Zhao Shaoxian, then turned around and left the dilapidated temple. The cold wind howled outside the dilapidated temple, and the sky and earth were snow-white. Lu Qingling held a long sword and walked straight into the forest on one side. With a few swipes, she chopped off a pile of thick and long wooden sticks, picked up some firewood, and carried them back to the dilapidated temple. "Mother." As soon as Zhao Shaoxian saw Lu Qingling enter, he quickly welcomed her. "Son, come and help start the fire." Lu Qingling handed the flint to Zhao Shaoxian, and then suddenly began to manipulate the pile of wooden sticks. Xiao Rongjin sat by the fire, and the burning fire slowly heated up his frozen body. The small dilapidated temple also gradually warmed up with this fire. Lu Xiong, along with his subordinates, also started a fire and walked for over 30 miles. Everyone was exhausted. Seeing that everyone was eating on the fire honestly and no one was causing trouble, his face immediately softened. Li Siging's gaze quietly fell on Lu Qingling. He saw her crouching on the ground, her half-wrapped green hair pouring down, wrapping her delicate body in it. With that seductive and charming look, he swallowed a mouthful of water in secret. In his boundless imagination, he suddenly felt a chill in his neck. He suddenly looked up and met the cold gaze of Xiao Rongjin. With his eyes facing each other, Li Si was even more frightened by the murderous aura in his eyes, causing his neck to shrink. After realizing this, he glared back fiercely and said in a foul voice. "What are you looking at?" "Looking for death." Xiao Rongjin's eyes narrowed and he spoke dangerously. "She is not someone you can covet." "Oh, you're a cripple, aren't you interested in him?" Li Sijing's gaze wandered recklessly on Xiao Rongjin's lap, and the malice and ridicule in his eyes were undisguised. Yu Shi saw Xiao Rongjin being humiliated and was about to speak, but was stopped by Xiao Rongs. "Mother, they are officials, we can't afford to provoke them now." Yu looked angrily at Xiao Rongs. "Serena, he's your big brother. How can you let him be humiliated?" "Mom, what's wrong with a few insults? Do you still want to be whipped?" Xiao Rongs was restless on her face. She had already been whipped on the back and didn't want to be whipped again. Upon hearing these words, Yu Shi's angry emotions suddenly froze. Thinking that she was now about to bow down to a lowly official, her once strong and enduring strength collapsed. Upon hearing Yu's restrained crying, Lu Qingling, who was originally squatting on the ground, suddenly looked up and shot the stick in her hand, hitting Li Sijing's mouth with a loud bang. Li Si didn't expect Lu Qingling to suddenly make a move. After a painful scream, she spat out a mouthful of blood. Looking at the front teeth that had fallen with blood, Li Si suddenly covered her mouth. "He provoked me first." Lu Qingling spoke lightly and her gaze swept over Lu Xiong's face beside her. Lu Xiong glared at Li Sijing with a resentful expression, saying coldly. "I take the blame for it. If you dare to cause trouble again, you can just die here for me." Lu Xiong was also angry in his heart, but none of them were a match for Lu Qingling. If they really started fighting, they would make the other party anxious and kill these officials to escape, which would not be worth the loss. Lu Xiong spoke harshly, and Li Si could only shatter his teeth and vomit blood. He gave Lu Qingling and Xiao Rongjin a sinister glare, temporarily suppressing the pressure. Fu Rui's gaze wandered around Lu Qingling and Li Sijing, then lowered her head and quietly curled up the corners of her mouth. Fu Sun frowned, worried in his heart, and opened his mouth to say something, but then gave up. In a silent atmosphere, Zhao Xiaoxian walked up to Lu Qingling and curiously asked as she kept weaving the vines in her hand. "Mom, what are you doing?" Lu Qingling's hand speed was extremely fast, quickly weaving several vines into a net, and then inserting those thick wooden sticks into it. "Uncle Zhao's legs are not convenient, so my mother can make him a simple stretcher to carry him on the road. This way, we won't delay everyone's journey." Upon hearing this, Xiao Rongjin lifted her eyes and looked over. Yu quickly wiped away her tears and stood up with a surprised expression on her face. "Miss Fu, are you telling the truth?" Before Lu Qingling could speak, Fu Rui snorted coldly on one side. "Sister, Yu Bai can't walk anymore. Why don't you make him a stretcher like that? Sister is so amazing, I don't think you would just leave your family alone and just want to please men, right?" Upon hearing this, Li Shi's eyes lit up and she looked at Lu Qingling eagerly. But Lu Qingling said without lifting her head. "I see you have a lot of free time. If you have this time, why don't you shut up and rest well? When you're on the road later, help your wife hold you by." Upon hearing this, Fu Rui said with a look of grievance on her face. "Sister, if you don't want to help you by make a stretcher, just say it directly. I can understand, after all, sister, you are carrying a wild seed with an unknown father. It will be difficult for you to marry yourself in the future. Isn't it just that you have a disabled person who is worthy of you? Can't you be stuttering?" Upon hearing Fu's inquiry, he quickly stopped drinking. "Rui, shut up." However, it was already late, and Lu Qingling glanced over with a cold expression in her eyes, her long sword buzzing in her hand. End of this chapter.